when I die, I don't want my friends and family members to get together and go through all of the typical rites of a funeral. I would much rather that they got together and, watched a movie in my remembrance. So today I'm going to be talking about some films that are on that short list to screen at my own funeral. And so obliquely, these are film recommendations, but I'm going to be cautious in calling them recommendations just because I think a lot of them don't have a very large appeal. Of course, the fact that I would want any of these played at my own funeral should be a pretty massive endorsement of their artistic quality and prowess. I'm cautious in recommending them because I think they can be inaccessible or unenjoyable if you're not into a very certain type of film-going experience. But nonetheless, today I'm going to be talking about some really cool works of cinematic art, in my opinion. So my official disclaimer is that many of these films that I'm going to talk about are very slow and uneventful, and I myself am a very big proponent of slow cinema and films that have a meditative quality to them, that feel like a meditation chamber, rather than a film that feels like a roller coaster or a delivery machine for the plot. Of course, I love these films, but if you're someone who is more of a plot person or a narrative person, you might not, and that's totally fine. The best way that I can describe these films is that for me, they're like landscapes. So if you've ever gone on a walk, late at night, just aimlessly wandering around, or you've sat by the ocean for many hours after the sun has gone down and listened to the waves, or you've been on a long train ride and you're staring out the windows as it takes you far away to nowhere. For me, those are the sort of experiences and emotions that are evoked when I watch many of these films. So I just want to be upfront about the types of movies that I'm going to be talking about, just so no one gets mad at me. That being said, I'm going to move on to the list. Before I do that, I just want to shout out my favorite funeral scene from a movie, at least that I could think of. This is from The Amazing Spider-Man 2. If you're tapped in, you know that Andrew Garfield is the GOAT Spider-Man. I just love this scene to death. Really, really tragic and heart-wrenching performance from him. But anyways, talking about the actual films on this list, I'm going to start off with Vagabond. Now, this is probably Agnès Varda's most popular film. She's a director who really needs no introduction, but I still feel it's like kind of underseen, relatively in all things considered. But anyways, it's a really amazing work of art. It actually starts off really interestingly, with the image of our protagonist frozen dead in a ditch, and she's sort of immortalized in this very unceremonious pose. And the rest of the film is spent basically as a series of flashbacks and vignettes and recollections as we try to understand who she was as an individual. The key word there is try. So as the title implies, she is a vagabond of sorts. She has no real home or family or job, and she sort of just trudges around the countryside, having a bunch of chance interactions with people. And it's through these interactions with people and through these vignettes that we begin to slowly piece things together about who she was. But ultimately, it really is a film about the impossibility of understanding someone with totality and absolute clarity. We try to recreate her through all of these different puzzle pieces, but they just don't seem to line up perfectly. We can't get the full portrait. And I love this concept for a funeral because for me, that's the exact phenomenon of a funeral, right? You have a central person who is no longer there, but you have all of these other people from their lives that are coming together in congregation and sharing bits and pieces of how this person left shards of themselves in the world. So I love that concept that even at a funeral, no matter how many people you have there, you can never know exactly who that person was. The only person with the wonderful privilege of knowing them is themselves, and they're gone. And that's a beautifully human thing. Now there's a scene in this film where she and this guy David are sort of squatting in this house. And she, for fun, is inscribing their name on the dust in a mirror. And he quickly wipes it out and he says, don't leave any trace, right? Don't leave traces of yourself. And so there's sort of a thesis and an antithesis at work here, in the sense that David believes that the traces that we leave of ourselves are physical in nature, right? They are the things that we do on the world. They are the things we own, the materials we possess and interact with, how much money we have. But of course, the film gestures to the complete opposite, which is that the real traces we leave of ourselves are the interactions we have with other people, the marks that we leave on them. That's how we etch our existence into reality. If you've ever read the book The Real Life of Sebastian Knight by Vladimir Nabokov, or if you've seen the film Rashomon by Akira Kurosawa, I feel like there's a lot of similarities between all of these. Now, what this movie is really praised for is the fact that it really resists giving you a full understanding of the main protagonist, Mona. There's an intense fragmentation of her character. Some people see her as a victim, other people see her as a threat, or as a laborer, or as a sexual encounter, and no one's particularly wrong in their impression because she's a completely multifaceted individual. So there's many times where she is taken advantage of, but there's also many times where she takes advantage of other people. She can be incredibly rude and belligerent and selfish and immature, which was actually pretty revolutionary for a film of this ilk at the time. So she's by no means an aspirational symbol, right? But she's an incredibly human symbol. And on that note of being human, one of my favorite moments in the film is after we're shown her frozen corpse, we actually cut to the image of her on the beach. And it's sort of this mythical image. And I actually believe that it's the director of the film herself, Agnès Varda, who's narrating this scene. And she says, "I know little about her myself, but it seems to me that she came from the sea." Now, I can't help but feel that this has to be a reference to Hesiod's theogony and, of course, the creation myth of Aphrodite, who's purportedly born of sea foam. And it's one of the most famous creation myths ever, especially of those creation myths that have to do with the sea. But it's really interesting that Varda kind of begins the story with this idyllic image of Aphrodite, who is the most complete feminine deity in human mythology. And then for the rest of the film, we see the exact opposite. And that's not to say that Mona isn't beautiful in her own right, but she doesn't live a deified life. She lives an incredibly painfully human life. So a beautiful kind of contrast that's set up at the beginning of the film that I thought was incredibly thought-provoking regarding human life and all of the imperfections that it has. Now, next up, I have another film, Goodbye Dragon Inn, directed by Tsai Ming-liang. Now, if anyone saw my last film video, you know that this guy's my favorite filmmaker of all time, and I really, this whole channel is just an excuse to start talking about this guy. I almost didn't put this in the video because it's almost a little too personal for a shitty YouTube video, but I can't in good faith offer the premise of films for a funeral without talking about Goodbye Dragon Inn. So by a million miles, this is my favorite film of all time, probably my favorite piece of artwork that I've ever seen a human create. And I'm going to sound so insufferable here, but I'm pretty sure I've seen this film like over 200 times. Now that doesn't really count because a lot of times I use it to help me fall asleep. So if I'm having trouble falling asleep, which I often do, I throw this film on, and then within like 10 to 15 minutes, I'm knocked out. So it has a really somnolent quality to it if you let it, which should be a testament to just how uneventful it is. I think it maybe has around 7 lines of dialogue total, and I don't think the first line of dialogue is spoken until around 40 minutes into the film. So it's really not a film about characters interacting with each other so much as it's about the sort of ambiance and the atmosphere of this place, and all of these strange diegetic noises and happenings. Speaking about the film itself, it takes place in a derelict movie theater that is, it was once thriving, but is now at the end of its life. And it's about to be shut down, and on the last night of its opening, it decides to show one final movie, which is the 1967 King Hu film, Dragon Inn. By the way, that film is incredible. If you like martial arts, you need to go watch that film. And on this last night, you have a bunch of vagrants and odd figures and kind of weird people who are wandering around the theater like ghosts. And it's implied at many points that they are literally ghosts, which is really cool to think about. One thing I want to point out is just how architectural this film is. Now, if you look at these stills, you can see that there's this intense emphasis on interior spaces, claustrophobic interior spaces, halls, backways, staircases, corridors, things like that, right? And so when I talked about films being meditative or having, almost a meditation space-like quality to them, Goodbye Dragon Inn really exemplifies that. It really feels like a building that you can enter and occupy at your own will for as long as you want. And while you're inside of it, I think it really does have a transformative power as sort of ridiculous as that sounds. So there is a reason that I return to this film so much. I love existing alongside this film. But anyways, there are actually characters in this film to think about. So we have here who is, this woman is a disabled ticket lady. Now, she spends most of the film wandering around the back halls of the theater, and she limps the entire time because, again, she is disabled. And so she spends most of the time wandering around looking for this other character who is the projectionist. And she has this sort of steamed bun that she wants to give to him as a confession of love on the last day that they work together. And in many ways, she is a personification of the theater itself. She is literally on her last leg, but nonetheless full of life and verve, and has such a strong personality throughout this film. Now, outside these two characters, we have other random people like this Japanese tourist who has come to the theater not because he cares about the movie, but because he's heard it's a cruising spot for gay men. So you can see there's this hilarious shot of like all these dudes who are taking a piss next to each other, ostensibly cruising. And actually, I read on the wiki that the theater was a real-life cruising spot, so really cool to think about. You also have this woman down here who is one of the few people actually seemingly engrossed by the film, so maybe a stand-in for the viewer there, and she gets up to all sorts of interesting antics that I'll leave for you to discover on your own. But most interestingly, we have these two old men here. Now, these two old men are actually real-life actors. And not only are they actors, they are the same two actors from the original 1967 film. So there's this crazy meta aspect here where you have, these actors who on screen are so acrobatic and lively and at the peak of their career, coming back 40 years later for a film within a film to watch themselves on screen. And they sort of, reminisce on things like, the changes in landscapes of cinema and movie going, obviously the change in their careers and in stardom. There's this beautiful lamentation where one of them says, no one remembers us anymore and no one goes to the theater anymore. So a beautiful reunion that is kind of, it racks your brain when you see it in the film. It's crazy to see, but completely beautiful. Now, I'm not going to talk about this film too much more, or I don't want to get too in depth, but just to show you how much it means to me. When I was in Taipei earlier this year, this is going to make me look so lame, but I went and I hunted down the building where this was filmed. Now, obviously the theater itself shut down pretty much right after this film was made, so close to 2 decades ago. But the building is still there, and I was able to go inside, and you can see this is the final shot of the film here. By the way, what a gorgeous shot. The way that the rain is sort of given form by the neon, and you have, again, that ticket lady who's limping out into the rain. I find it such a gorgeous final image. But the building is still standing, so pretty cool to see. And in fact, this shot here of the projectionist following her out into the rain, you can see that this is the same staircase. So pretty cool. I just love how this film portrays death as something that's tragic but also comical and absurd. I love how architectural it is. I love how personified the theater is. It really feels like it has its own sense of agency. It can make decisions and lead characters one way or another. And the rain in this film is something metaphysical. It is loud and this unending deluge that sort of permeates every moment of the film, even when you're inside. But nonetheless, it feels kind of comforting in a really strange way. So enough about Goodbye Dragon Inn. If you have the patience for this film, I highly recommend you check it out. Small chance it could change your life. Next up, we have Long Day's Journey into Night. This is a Chinese film by director Bi Gan. Now, I don't know if anyone watches the UFC, but after the the Ilya Topuria versus Justin Gaethje fight, I'm not allowed to bet on things anymore. That being said, if I were a betting man, I would put all my money on this guy becoming basically the defining filmmaker of China in the 21st century when things are all said and done. So 11 years ago, he put out his debut film, which was Kylie Blues. 10 out of 10, highly recommend. A couple years later, in 2018, he puts out this film, Long Day's Journey into Night. 10 out of 10, completely recommend. And then in 2025, just last year, he puts out Resurrection, his third film. Unsurprisingly, 10 out of 10, fully recommend. So already, for me, he is the just because of how monumental every single one of his films have been, he is already the best, mainland Chinese filmmaker of this century. But I'll give it some time before I concretize that statement. What I'm trying to say is this guy is absolutely cracked. And this film is amazing. Anyways, the film is split into two parts. Here are some stills from the first part. The first part of the film is a pretty straightforward, it's not straightforward, but it's pretty legible. Basically, you have a man who is going into the mountainous regions of China to search for his long-lost lover, this woman here. And his journey to find her is spliced with a bunch of flashbacks to their affair that they have many years ago. Now, they're having an affair because both of them are sort of entangled in this life of crime that they're trying to escape. And we don't really see the resolution to that storyline. We just know that at some point they get separated indefinitely. Now, halfway through the film, first of all, I love this shot here with the red and the rain. This whole first half of the film is gorgeous. Wait till you see the second half. Halfway through the film, he gets really close to finding her, and he meets this woman who says, she's actually just about to be here. What you should go do is you should go watch a movie, and then when the movie's done, you can come out and she'll be here. So he heeds the advice. He goes into this theater, and he falls asleep in the theater. One really cool thing is it's at this point that the film is supposed to switch to 3D, which is kind of a gimmick, but I think it's kind of a cool premise anyway. So in the film, all the characters put on their 3D goggles, and you're supposed to do the same if you saw this in a 3D theater. But he actually falls asleep in the theater, and this brings us to the second half of the film. Now, if the first half of the film was like 10 out of 10, fully recommend, the second half of the film is like 10 out of 10, like the best thing you've ever seen. So the crazy thing about this second half of the film is it's all one unbroken shot. So it's a 59-minute long take with no cuts. Now, it's not like they have two characters talking in a room and they call it a long take. Like, no, if you look at the stills here, these are all from the same scene. So you can see he's going through vastly different scenarios, and it's this entire journey that he goes on, and it's just done so flawlessly that it really took my breath away when I saw it for the first time, when I saw it for the second time, when I saw it for the third time. It's just masterful. And because the last thing that we see before this long sequence is him falling asleep, of course there's this salient question of whether or not he's dreaming, and whether or not this is a dream, it's a memory, or if it's reality, or something in between, right? And so this is what the film is really concerned with. It's about how memory, dream, reality, and cinematic art can all sort of intermingle and become indistinguishable from one another. Now, there's a scene I want to talk about that I absolutely love. In this dream sequence, he meets a 12-year-old boy who's sort of implied to be his long-lost, estranged son. And the boy asks him this question. He says, "Have you ever kissed a woman?" And the man goes, "Yeah, of course I've kissed a woman." And the little boy then probes and he says, what is it like? What's it like to kiss a woman? And he simply responds, "It's like being in a dream." Now, I love this answer because, first of all, he's poking fun at the kid, right? He's sort of taunting him and saying, keep dreaming, kid. Like, you're only 12. You can't even conceptualize what it's like to kiss a woman. Like, you're not going to get there for many years. Like, keep dreaming. But within the context of the film and what the film is portraying about dreams and love, there's this idea that, a dream is something you can really only experience when you're fully inside of it. Once you're outside of the dream, once you wake up, once you try to describe it with words, it sort of eludes you and slips away. And love, and specifically this affair that he is fixated on from all these years ago, seems to function in a really similar way. It can't be fully remembered. It can't be re-accessed in the present. It's something that is dreamlike and can really only be dreamed or represented through cinematic art. So that's what's going on in this film in my interpretation. So insane film, complete technical and poetic masterpiece. Definitely, in my opinion, the preeminent Chinese filmmaker to keep an eye out for. Next up, we have one of my favorite directors of all time, Chantal Akerman. This is tied for my favorite film of hers, and it's News from Home. Now, the premise is very simple. Basically, in the 1970s, Chantal Akerman moves to New York from Belgium. And she does that because she's pursuing dreams of becoming a filmmaker, of an artist, and of course, she would succeed wildly. But while she's living in New York, her mother back in Brussels is sending her all of these letters telling her news from home, right? What's going on in her family, gossip, talking about how much she misses Chantal. And the whole movie is Chantal Akerman reading out these letters from her mother in her own voice. That's the narration of the film. And what's interesting is that it's paired with these gorgeous shots of film, of New York City on film. And you can see they have this incredible luminous and nocturnal quality to them. To me, this is by far the most wistful and alien and sort of distant and beautiful that New York has ever looked on video. So, the film is this completely searing portrait of urban loneliness and alienation. You have an artist who's moved halfway across the world chasing her dreams and has temporarily left behind her mother and her family. And she's in a city that feels domineering and insurmountably large and foreign. And I imagine for many of us, that is an incredibly relatable experience, whether we move away for school, for work, for romance, or for family. Now, the film is particularly interesting because of that disconnect between what we're hearing, those letters from her mother, and what we're seeing. What we're hearing is incredibly intimate. You can see her in this quote. She's talking about her family back home, and her mother signs off, "Your loving mother." Incredibly intimate thing to reveal to an audience. But then it's paired with this completely sterile image almost of these, ambiguous silhouettes against a harsh New York City neon. For me, this is one of the big observations of the film, which is that loneliness isn't the absence of people. It's about the inability to reach the people that mean something to you. And so many of the people that are captured in this film are just textures of the city. They are not discrete personalities that feel like you can interact with. So a really strange phenomenon to watch this film and to see that disconnect, something that's incredibly intimate and something that's incredibly distant. If you're a fan of this famous painting here, Nighthawks by Edward Hopper, I feel that the film captures that aesthetic perfectly and consistently throughout. Just like Hopper's Nighthawks, News from Home has this sense of well-lit nocturnal loneliness, right? So a beautiful portrait of family, the pursuit of dreams, and loneliness in a strange city. So very beautiful film, highly recommend. Next, we have Landscape in the Mist. Now, this might be kind of blasphemous to say, but in the spirit of making just ridiculous and contrarian claims just for fun, I think that Theo Angelopoulos, who is the Greek director of this film, is the greatest Greek poet of all time. Not that it's a competition or that that's even a fair comparison, but just to communicate how much I love this guy's films. In terms of poetics, which I'm using, of course, liberally here, I have Theo Angelopoulos over Homer, over Sophocles, over Kawase, and even over George Seferis, who is probably my second favorite literary poet of all time. So of course I'm not going to die on this hill, but to me Angelopoulos is a poet in every sense of the word. He's a cinematic poet. Every one of his films has left me completely spellbound, and after I finish them, the images are just completely seared into my brain. They stay with me for multiple weeks on end. So you can see that they have such a quality about them that I almost can't put into words. As the title implies, it almost feels like there's a mist kind of hanging over every one of his images. But enough poetic language here. Landscape in the Mist is about two Greek children who basically become convinced that their father is somewhere in Germany, their long-lost father who they've never met. And so they sneak out one night and they embark on this odyssey to the north, to Germany, to try and look for him. And I use that word odyssey very intentionally here. Partway through the film, it becomes apparent or suggested that the father doesn't really exist at all, and he might be kind of a myth created by their mother to give them some sense of solace that they couldn't have otherwise found. But nonetheless, it's the possibility that transforms and sort of galvanizes the journey. The children aren't even really looking for a discrete person anymore. They're looking for, more broadly, someone to tell them where they belong. For certainty and direction, they're looking for someone to guide them. And the tragedy of growing up is that eventually you have to do that on your own. And there won't always be someone to guide you in life, to show you where to go. Now, there's one image from the film that has become one of the most iconic images in all of cinema, which is this enormous marble hand that's being hoisted out of the sea. and its index finger is broken. Now, it feels kind of impossibly symbolic here, right? A monument reaching out to offer direction, but the finger that was supposed to point the way is gone. So I want to make a brief digression here, and then I'll tie things together. At the beginning of this section, I made a ridiculous comparison about Angelopoulos and Homer and Sophocles, and I called them all Greek poets. Now, can you really do that? Is that a fair comparison? Is that a fair denomination? Many people would rightfully say no. Between ancient Greece, the time of Homer, and modern Greece, the time of Angelopoulos, there are centuries of Ottoman rule. There's migration, occupation, civil war, exile, labor migration. So how direct really is the cultural lineage between ancient Greece and modern Greece? Whatever your answer is, modern Greece has always lived in conversation and in many ways in the shadow of its ancient Greek past. This idea of marble, of ruins, of mythology, completely saturates modern Greek identity, and it's almost impossible to escape. And so the broken marble hand doesn't really just symbolize this universal idea of lost guidance. In many ways, it is a very specifically Greek symbol. It's a question about whether or not the past can still show modern Greeks the way to go, or if perhaps they are asking the past for questions and guidance it can no longer give. So interesting to think about. This is actually an excerpt from George Sephiroth's poem Mythostorema, which handles many, many similar themes. You can already see the parallel between the imagery of marble and the idea of guidance, and a past which doesn't seem to speak to you. But what makes Landscape in the Mist so extraordinary is that you don't have to think about any of this to really be moved by it and to be entranced by it. Because beneath all of this history and the politics is something very simple. It's a story about wanting somewhere to belong, about wanting someone to sort of reassure you that you're heading in the right direction, and realizing little by little that growing up means continuing forward even when you don't have anyone to show you the way. So all my life I've had my parents to look up to and to ask for guidance, which I realize is an immense privilege. But at my funeral, in all likelihood, my parents will not be there. And in all likelihood, there will be some decades of my life where my parents are not there and where my elders are not there, where every important decision is ultimately my own. And I can't think of another film that captures that tragic reality with more grace and more sadness and really more beauty than Landscape in the Mist. Again, gorgeous film. Everything that is seen by the camera of Theo Angelopoulos belongs in a museum. Just completely breathtaking. Next, I want to talk about a documentary. I'm not a big documentary guy, but this film here, For All Mankind, directed by Reinert, completely redefined what I thought a documentary could be. So unlike a typical documentary where you have stock footage and dramatic recreations and talking head interviews, For All Mankind is a collection of real 16mm footage from the Apollo 7 through Apollo 17 missions. So all of the footage in here is from the actual journeys to Earth's orbit and sometimes to the moon. It was actually enlarged to 35mm by Reinert himself, and he did it by hand, which is a labor of love that took him, I think, a year and a half. So complete passion project, and it is obvious from the first second of the film to the very last. But on top of all of this breathtaking footage, you have astronauts from these actual journeys who are being interviewed by Reinert. Now, you never hear Reinert, he cuts himself out. You just hear these incredible descriptions of what the journey was like. And what I find really remarkable is that, Reinert isn't interested in portraying these astronauts as, scientific experts or national heroes, like you might expect from a typical documentary. So he really takes a step back and he lets the astronauts speak about their experiences in the most human way possible. It's like listening to your grandfather or your grandmother tell you a story from their childhood, right? So I just found the narration to be, so well done. I mean, can you imagine leaving the planet Earth and looking down below you and seeing this small planet where every human memory, every human life, every human emotion, every civilization, every animal, everything in history has unfolded below your feet? I mean, what do you even think about? What goes through your head when you're seeing something like that no human was ever evolved to see? So just imagining it gives me kind of a beautiful existential crisis, but being able to witness it with your own eyes has to be something that completely rearranges your understanding of the world. Now, the beautiful thing about this film is that it does such a good job of imparting that experience onto you. The astronauts are telling you in the most kind of direct language they can what that experience was like. And I have to read a quote here from the film itself, where there's an astronaut who's sort of talking about what it's like to see the Earth with his own eyes. So he says, quote, "You have to literally just pinch yourself and ask yourself the question silently. Do you really know where you are at this point in time and space and in reality and in existence? When you look out the window and you're looking back at the most beautiful star in the heavens, the most beautiful star because it's the one we understand and the one we know, and it's where home, humanity, people, family, love, and life are. You can see from pole to pole and across oceans and continents, and you can watch it turn, and there's no strings holding it up, and it's moving in a blackness that is almost beyond conception." So, what an experience, right? One that must fundamentally change your understanding of the scale of the universe. It's so cliche to say, but the biggest problems on Earth are really so small on a cosmic level. So it might be weird to have this documentary on my list, but I don't really see it as a documentary about space. For me, it is a documentary about humanity, right? About the canvas of all human existence, which is the Earth. About the canvas of all human ingenuity and ambition and aspirations, which is space and the cosmos. And the canvas of all human reflection and wonder, which is our own memory, right? The memories of these astronauts told in the most human and beautiful way possible. So gorgeous, gorgeous sleeper film. Next, we have The Mourning Forest. This is a recent watch for me, and it really struck a chord, so I wanted to showcase it. It is directed by Naomi Kawase, who's sort of a sleeper pick Japanese filmmaker. But anyways, I'm going to go through and explain the premise of this film, and I think immediately you're going to see all of the moving parts. So it's set in rural Japan at a small nursing home, and in this nursing home, you have this old man named Shigeki, and he's dealing with dementia. So he forgets most things, but one thing that he really clings on to is the passing of his wife, Mako, who died 33 years ago. But all things considered, he's still quite playful and whimsical. Now, taking care of him is this young nurse here named Machiko. Now, Machiko has this intense and heavy and sort of sunken atmosphere hanging around her head. This is because very recently, right before the film, her son dies, and it's sort of implied to be her fault in some way or another. He has pockets of darkness in the same way that she has pockets of light, but all things considered, they both have this immense chasm of grief that they're dealing with. Now, the inciting incident of the film is when Shigeki runs off into the nearby forest. Now, she being his caretaker, of course, she has to run after him. And I wouldn't say this is a spiritual film, but it becomes very clear that there's something kind of there's something kind of supernatural about this forest, right? The way that, for example, the wind is portrayed in this world, it has, we have these intense and very long static shots of the wind swaying through the tree canopies, of it blowing around tall grass and swaying through linen that's being hung out to dry. And so it almost feels tactile in a way. The wind feels like it has a voice. The forest feels like it has a presence. And there is something divine in the rain, the river, and the soil. And certainly when the characters step foot into the forest, the titular Mourning Forest, it kind of feels like they step into heaven on earth. Now, not in the sense that it's paradise or that it's idyllic, but in the sense that they've, the people that they've lost and memories they've tried to suppress and moments from their life seem to precipitate around them outside of their control. It does feel kind of like a heavenly realm. In fact, Shigeki, who is, again, suffering from dementia, seems to get a lot more clear-headed and lucid in the forest. And conversely, Machiko, who seems to be pretty level-headed outside of the forest, starts to descend into this aching maternal torment within the forest. Now, there's a beautiful quote he says in the forest, a moment of wisdom, where he says, something along the lines of, "The water of the river which flows constantly never returns to its source." So one of the sort of theses of the film. But overall, it's a really gorgeous and very patient meditation on loss and spiritual reunion. I have a big soft spot for this film because my grandmother, dealt with dementia for many years, and I have to shout out Naomi Kawase here. I feel like she handled the illness with such incredible softness and tact that I have a lot of respect for this film. Also, if you've seen Drive My Car, which is another fantastic Japanese rumination on grief with a central duo of an older man and a younger woman, to me, this is like the complete inspiration for that film. I mean, watching this, I saw so many parallels. So if you're a fan of Drive My Car, which is one of the great works of our century, also go check out The Burning Forest. Amazing and very soft film. Next we have Samsara. This is a Spanish film that also takes place in Laos and Zanzibar, directed by Lois Patiño. And for me, this is one of the craziest films on this list, one of the craziest films I think I've seen this year. For me, it's proof that there are filmmakers who are still really pushing the envelope and challenging the language of film, rather than just sort of following in the footsteps of people before them. So as the title implies, it is concerned with cycles of rebirth and reincarnation. So for that reason alone, a beautiful film for a funeral. But the film has two distinct parts. Now, the first part takes place in Laos. It follows a group of teenage boys who are kind of like Buddhist monks in training at this temple. And one of the boys here makes frequent trips to an ailing and dying woman in the village. Now, he brings her a book, which in the West we would call the Tibetan Book of the Dead. I believe originally it is called the Bardo Todal. But it's a sort of, to my cursory understanding, it is a guide, among other things, a guide for spirits as they pass between one life and the next, specifically as they navigate the interstitial transitory place between one life and the next called the Bardo. So, of course, eventually this woman will die and she will have to pass through that transitory phase before she could be reincarnated. Of course, the cinematography is a bit saccharine here, but it gives us, in my opinion, one of the most beautiful scenes I think Akerman has ever captured, and that is this scene right here. Now, when I saw this in the film, I was so completely astonished. Of course, I had seen it partly in the trailer, but and again, this is just a still that I'm showing you, but seeing it in the film was incredible. I almost don't believe it's real. But just such a gorgeous shot, and if even if the rest of the film was complete garbage, it would be worth watching for this a couple minute scene alone. So these are some Buddhist monks on the Kwangsi waterfall in Laos, and again, you have to pinch yourself to make yourself believe that it's a real thing that a camera is seeing, but it looks incredible. Anyways, eventually the old woman dies, and like I said, she has to pass through the Bardo, that transitory phase. This is where we get to what many would call the gimmick of the film. I actually thought this gimmick was incredibly moving. I had a great experience with it, but I imagine many people are going to sort of roll their eyes. Now, that is a 15-minute interlude in the film where pretty much all images go away, so it's mostly a black screen. There are some strobe lights, but the film invites you to close your eyes for 15 minutes and to meditate as you listen to an auditory rendition of the Bardo, of that transition between life and death. Now, I won't spoil the sounds that are in this interlude, but they are incredible. Like, it is a complete soundscape that you are welcomed into, and I found it, again, incredibly moving for myself. Now, hopefully you buy into the gimmick a little bit, hopefully you have a little bit of fun, and close your eyes and have a cool experience with it. Some people might think it's quite hackneyed. I wouldn't blame you, but again, I think it was a really cool thing, and at the very least, I'm glad that he's doing something that is kind of radical in a way, right? To have people go to a movie and close their eyes is kind of a ballsy move. But anyways, when you open your eyes at the end of the Bardo, we are no longer in Laos, but we are now in Zanzibar. And whereas the first portion of the film begins or ends with the death of that woman, this portion in Zanzibar begins with the birth of a baby goat. So obviously there is a sort of implication here that reincarnation is at play. And what I really like is that, of course we're in a different region of the world, but the cinematographer who shoots this part of the film is actually a different cinematographer than the one who shoots this part of the film. So it really feels like, in many ways, we are looking at life through a new set of eyes, which I think is again kind of gimmicky, but it worked really well for me. So this film is incredible. I'll leave all of the details for you to discover. But this one is interested with this little girl who kind of takes this goat in, and the sort of seaweed farming culture that they have in this village. Now, I will say that there are certainly some valid critiques to be made of this film. If you've watched it or you go watch it, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. It makes some generalizations and oversights about specifically Buddhism. For example, the idea of the bardo is primarily a Tibetan Buddhist idea, and Tibetan Buddhism is not very prominent in Laos. Most of Laos is Theravada Buddhist. So if you're looking for a doctrinally accurate, ethnographic work about Laotian Buddhism, I would not recommend this film. But it's partially a given, considering that many of the subjects we follow are not ultra dogmatic and pious practitioners, but they're actually teenage boys who have a very casual relationship with Buddhist philosophies. In fact, one of my favorite moments from this opening shot here, where we're watching them meditate, is that if you look closely, some of the boys have a hard time keeping their eyes closed during meditation, and they keep peeking open to look at the camera. And I find that hilarious because I imagine when you watch this bardo sequence, you're going to be doing the same thing. You probably won't keep your eyes closed the whole time. You're going to peek your eyes open and look at the strobes on screen. So really what I'm trying to say is that I think this film is much more interested with a universal spirituality and principles which underlie multiple religions and philosophies about human existence. So things like the presence of a human soul, which is something that can be guided and something that can navigate the spiritual world, the cyclicism of matter in the universe, things like that. So all things considered, it is a phenomenal film, and all of the Buddhists in my family, I'm sure, would eat it up. And last but not least, we have Threnody, which is a silent short film by Nathaniel Dorsky. Now, this is by far the most experimental and sort of inaccessible work on this list, but Dorsky is, of course, a pioneer of new American avant-garde cinema, alongside the likes of Andy Warhol, Jonas Mekas, Stan Brakhage, and his partner Jerome Hyler, Greg Markopoulos, just to name a few. He actually wrote one of my favorite books on film. I would hesitate to call it film theory, but this is devotional cinema. I highly, highly recommend. Here's one of my favorite quotes that I pulled from it. He's actually talking about an Antonioni film here, Lenate, but it laminates perfectly onto Threnody, which is the short film. So he says, quote, "The rightness of all these shifts of space, the weight of light and darkness are the meaning, the aliveness and the beauty of the film. All is present and all is functioning." So Threnody, which is one of my favorite words, and I learned it from this film, is something that Dorsky makes as the title implies, as a tribute to a friend who passed away. And it's mostly a collection of gorgeous images, what Dorsky calls earthly phenomena, that are shot on 16mm film. And you can see the parallels here between his writing and the way that his eye sort of sees the world. There's this intense focus on light and shadow, sort of like a chiaroscuro in painting. And for me, the way that light is shown in this film has such a hallowed and somber quality to it. It really does feel reminiscent of a sun that is beginning to set on someone's life, and those beautiful final hours of warm and sharp light before blue hour and before sunset. So if I screened this at my funeral, I think people would probably walk out, but I love this film to death. I do have to disclaim that Nathaniel Dorsky is kind of particular about seeing his films played at a specific frame rate, which is 18 frames per second instead of 24 frames per second. You can call it pretentious if you want. He calls it the sacred speed, which is actually where I'm borrowing, ironically, that word sacred from. But realistically, very few of us are ever going to get to see a Dorsky film projected, in real life at 18 frames per second. So in the meantime, I have no qualms about watching this on YouTube or online. If you're feeling particularly heretical and blasphemous, you can actually watch this silent film scored to a song of your choosing. Now, the first 2 to 3 times that I watched the film, I really tried to be faithful, and I watched it silently. But I realized that the concept of a true silent film experience didn't really exist for me. If you were to watch it in real life, you would hear the sort of whirring of the projector, you'd hear shuffling around you. When I watched it in college, I heard the voices of students outside my dorm room. When I watched it in my own bedroom, in the darkest way possible with noise canceling headphones, I could still hear my own heartbeat. I could hear my inhalations and my exhalations. And so I kind of gave up at some point, and I thought, if I'm going to be hearing random things during this film anyway, I might as well take some agency and pair it with music that I actually like. So again, I encourage you to, the first time you watch it, you should probably be a little bit more respectful and watch it silently. But I myself am a big proponent of just having fun with film and doing things that bring you enjoyment and make the artwork stirring for you. So if I have to end this video with one recommendation for a song to pair with this film, it would be My Life in Art by the band Mojave 3. They are a really cool group with many ties to Slowdive, if you know them, and My Life in Art is one of my favorite songs of all time. It's around 7.5 minutes long, so you could probably listen to it around 3.5 times during the course of this film. Anyways, if you've made it this far, thank you for watching, thank you for listening, and these are Films for a Funeral.